Today we are going over our My Money, My Way mini lessons. It's part of a 6-day series to celebrate the release of my brand new book, My Money, My Way, which was released out into the world. We've just been really trying to get the word out and all of this wonderful knowledge and information and this true life change in people's hands. So that's what this is about. Today we are on day 5 of 6. It's very exciting because we're going to be talking about something that means a lot to me. And we're going to be talking about creating a plan of attack for your debt. And I truly thank you for taking the time to be here with me today for this mini lesson. Before we get started on the nitty-gritty details, I want to remind you, I talked to Ryan today to ensure that our My Money, My Way bundle is still available for you all, because there are some amazing resources that I would like you to use for today's mini lesson. So very quickly, we're going to be talking about all of this today's mini lessons, but you want to download the debt list worksheet, and then also for you to download we have a couple of really cute debt payoff trackers in there. And I'm gonna be walking you through on how to fill these out, because I get a lot of questions like, Miko, I have the tracker, I just don't know how to fill it out. So I'm gonna be giving you some quick helpful tips to filling out my debt payoff trackers. And also another huge tool is inside of that bundle. It's the 10-day email plan of attack challenge. And inside that challenge, we have our brand new debt payoff calculator, not ever released anywhere else. This is the first time we're introducing it out in the world, and it's, I think, very, very helpful when it comes to what we're going to be talking about a little bit today, prioritizing your debt and figuring out how the heck you're going to pay it all off. So first and foremost, I think it's critical for me to say, when I talk about paying off debt, I'm not talking about making the payments. I'm not even talking about how much debt you pay off. I'm talking about learning to manage your money in a way where you don't go back into debt in the future. Now, my debt journey, so I had my first experience with accumulated debt in 2011 when I got my first student loan bill in the mail. Floored. I think it was over like $600. I only had about $33,000 for my bachelor's degree that I needed to pay off, but that minimum monthly payment was pretty big. I did experience debt before that. I mean, I was that typical 18-year-old who, after high school, went out on my own, got my first apartment. Bless my beautiful mom's heart. She helped me get into my first apartment. She came and helped me get I specifically remember this. She helped me get pots and pans, and she bought me a broom to make sure I could sweep up my place, help me get a couch in there. But I was like a lot of other teenagers at that time. I started getting credit card offers in the mail. And that was my first real experience with debt. Luckily, I didn't accumulate so much debt where I couldn't pay it off. That really happened to me when I got my first student loan bill. And then the credit card debt and the other high interest debt started happening in my life, especially after my divorce. That's when I saw zero credit card debt to over $20,000 in credit card debt. $17,000 was on a Discover credit card with 23% interest. And when I look back now at that Discover credit card, really what it was my crutch. That's what the word that comes to mind when I think about that credit card. It was my lifeline in a time of desperation where I doubted my ability as a mom. Those are the things and thoughts that come to my mind when I think about that credit card. It was me I was always in this constant state of desperation, trying to always make sure my little guy was okay, especially after the divorce. I felt so much shame and guilt because I don't know if you've gotten to this part in the book, but I mentioned something that I've never talked about before, which was the experience of my parents' divorce and what that really looked like in my life, and how it was such a traumatic experience in my life that it had followed me all the way into adulthood and I didn't even know it. And so I recognized when I got divorced the effects that it would have on my child, and I was desperately searching for ways to make it okay for him. And in my mind, not knowing any better, right? Giving myself grace here, not knowing any better, I thought that meant making our lives the same as when we were a family. And I talk about that in the book. I pretended like nothing was different, even the finances. I tried buying my son things, telling myself the excuse that I'm doing this to be a good mom. I'm doing this for my son. But in reality, I was taking on debt to make myself feel better as a mom. That was really hard for me to come to terms with. Because even though I thought at the time I was coming from a place of selflessness, I was really coming from a very selfish place. I was using my son as an excuse to use debt in my life. Whew, that's a really big, hard statement to say out loud, but it's the truth. One of the things when it comes down to paying off debt in your life is recognizing why you are in debt in the first place. All the things that I just told you right now took me years to come to terms with and to discover and to address and to heal from. And even now talking about it, I still get emotional because I'm not gonna lie, like I still have a lot of feelings about that time in my life. How lonely it was after my divorce, how crazy fast these things seemed to get out of control with me, with my money. It was like, when I think about it, just like, just flies by, right? It's like, how could I let it get this bad? But then I started saying, how could I let it get this bad, and blaming myself. I said, this is my story. This is my debt picture. Now it's time for me to fix it. Now it's time for me to address it. So paying off your debt, and I know a lot of you approached me at the beginning of this new year saying either one, you're going to be debt free this year, or your number one goal was to decrease debt this year. So let's make that freaking happen today. So that's the number one thing I want to talk about. We're going to be focusing on establishing healthy habits around knocking out our debt and learning how, if you think about all of our mini lessons up into this point, days 1 through 4 are all building blocks to implement healthy habits in our lives, learning how to manage our money well so we don't rely on debt in the future. The next thing I want you to think about today, and something I also had to come to terms with, is how does your debt make you feel? It's kind of a weird question to think about. And usually most of the time when people talk about paying off debt, they don't ask this. Is there a certain aspect of your debt that's producing maybe some anxiety for you? Is there certain things about your debt that is kind of pulling you down in this black hole of shame and guilt? Maybe you don't know what to feel around your debt because you were like me, you're like, I don't know how I freaking got here. When I thought about my debt at first, so my problem was high interest retail credit cards in general, many of them, over 10 of them, over 10 student loans, a car loan, a $17,000 car loan. That was another thing that happened. I drove a brand new Jeep Patriot off the lot 2 weeks before my divorce, before I decided we were going to get a divorce. And it only had 10,000 miles on it. And the moment I drove it off the lot, I owed more than it was worth. That's what happened with that. And I mean, the interest wasn't bad on it. I think the interest on my car stayed around 4%, but that was still $17,000. And on top of all of this, I also dealt with medical debt. In 2011, I don't know if you can see it, my wrist here. This is where they had to cut open my wrist. I have a metal plate and 6 screws in my wrist. I was in a severe motorcycle accident. Check this. I got a brand new Harley Davidson that I bought with cash. Okay, I saved up all this money, finally got the motorcycle of my dreams. It was a 2001 Harley Sportster that I converted into, I had a Screaming Eagle convert kit. Anyways, okay, this was like my dream bike. Literally the next day, I got into a motorcycle accident. Someone hit me at a red light. I didn't have medical insurance. I didn't have motorcycle insurance. I literally had a fractured pelvic bone. I didn't wear a full face helmet at the time. I had 2 severe black eyes, my whole face puffed up. And then I had my wrist and my hand hanging down here. And they drove me to the hospital, which, by the way, okay, ambulance rides are crazy expensive. I didn't know this at the time or would have drove my dang self. Anyways, I came out of that with $98,000 of medical debt. And on top of that, the guy who hit me just left me there in the middle of the road. We never found the guy, but I also didn't have motorcycle insurance, and there was my brand new Harley Davidson lying in the middle of the road, leaking gas everywhere. This is my experience with debt. When you look at your debt story, your debt picture, it's kind of this accumulation of all these things and events that's happened in our lives that backed us into a corner where we had to rely on debt. And that is my story when it comes to debt. Luckily, someone told me about the hospital that I was unfortunately, I went there on a whim. It was just the closest hospital that was near us at the time. And they have an amazing hardship program. I filled out a financial hardship package, and within 2 weeks I was accepted, and I had 90% of my medical debt wiped out. It still took me 6 years to pay off what I still owed, but at least it wasn't almost $100,000 worth. And so my mom sat down with me and helped me fill out the financial hardship packet, because at that time I had no idea what I was looking at. I just spent 4 days in the hospital. When I got out of the hospital, I had to stay with a friend because I couldn't even bathe myself. My body was that messed up. So that taught me a whole bunch of things, by the way. But how does your debt make you feel? Now, when I say all this stuff, I had a lot of experience with a lot of debts, right? One of the things that I felt was anger. I was mad that so much, I would fight so hard to come up with these payments to pay off my debt, and like 75% of it went to interest. And I hardly ever saw any progress on my principal. That made me very angry. Number 2, I felt anxiety. I felt anxiety in the beginning of paying off my debt because I was looking at how many debt accounts I had. It was so overwhelming. It was like, how am I even going to start on this? What do I even do with 10 credit cards, 10 student loans, a car loan? And so the reason I ask how it makes you feel is because that's going to be a good indicator on how you choose to pay it off. You want to face your debt head on and get a clear understanding of your overall debt picture. It's time to stop telling you the lie of minimum payments. Your minimum payments, even though you might be able to afford them in your life, is not an accurate representation of the debt that you have to face. I hid behind that lie for a really long time. And when I saw the total of over I think it was close to $78,000, I'm like, where the heck did this come from? I knew my minimum payments were high. They were approaching the $1,000 mark when I finally said enough is enough. But I had no idea it was that bad. And I felt a whole bunch of emotions. I was sad. I was scared. I was confused. I was overwhelmed. Like I said, it was like, how do I even start on this? So I want you to create an overall debt list. And this is what you're going to use the debt list worksheet for. You're going to write down your creditor, the balance, the overall balance for each creditor, your interest rate, your minimum payment. And then there's an order column, but I want you to leave that blank for now. I want you to just focus on, and for some of you, this might take some investigation. A great place to start, if you're saying, Nico, I don't even know what debt I have. It's time to start opening the statements that come in the mail, and also looking at your credit report is a good start on this investigative journey on figuring out what you have for your debt. You are legally, you can have get one free credit report a year from all 3 credit bureaus from annualcreditreport.com. I believe that during the pandemic, they started offering one free credit report a week. And I think they extended that until April. So that's a good place because that's going to list all of the debts that you have. So you're going to create that debt list. I think it's really critical that I say that. What's more important than the method you choose to use is making sure that you are doing one thing. And it's called using the rollover effect. Now, I've only mentioned this once on my Instagram. I did one reel about it a long time ago, months ago. This is more important than the method that you choose to use. This will be something that applies across the board on your debt payoff journey when it comes to your plan of attack. What is the rollover effect? The rollover effect is this. When you get the list of your debt and you have the priority in which you're going to pay it off, you're tackling that first debt. Okay, you pay it off. You then take the minimum payment you were paying on that first debt and any extra income you were paying on that first debt, and you apply them both to debt number 2. Once you pay off debt number 2 on your list, you're going to take the minimum payment from the first debt, the minimum payment on the second debt, all of the extra income that you were paying to debt number 2, and you're going to apply it to debt number 3. The reason I say this is so important because this is where the momentum starts. I have a lot of people, I was like this, I did this, where I paid off like 3 or 4 of my credit cards, and I'm like, I don't have that minimum payment anymore. I can apply it towards something else. So that is really crucial. And the reason I say this is because you get to this point where you're finally making some progress, and then it's really easy for lifestyle inflation to creep in and to get this feeling like, oh, I have this free money, this money that's no longer being thrown to my minimum payments. I can then use that money freely somewhere else. I'm telling you that I recommend that you use it and continue to use it on your plan of attack. You're just throwing it at your next debt list, priority on your list. Now, it's also, I think, important to mention, don't accumulate more debt, new debt, as you are paying debt off. We kind of just get this false sense that, oh, I have this extra money. I can then use it freely for whatever else. And it's really important that we keep that in the forefront of our minds so we can use it to the best of our abilities to really tackle the goals that we're wanting to accomplish. So we're not going to accumulate more debt while we're paying off debt. Also, become an investigator. We talked about becoming an investigator for your bills, your fixed expenses, the bills that you think you have to pay, but it might not have to be the amount that is coming in the mail, right? Being an investigator for your debt is the same thing. What options do you have when it comes to paying off your debt? Is there a financial hardship that you can apply for your medical debt? Can you qualify for any type of student loan forgiveness? If your debt is in collection, is there a way you can negotiate a debt settlement on your own? for a much lower amount. We have to start looking at what are our options here. Also, we talked about the lifestyle inflation. Now, your homework today is to face your debt head on. So you're going to come up with your list. When you come up with your list, you have to choose your plan of attack. How are you going to pay it off? There is no right or wrong way to pay off your debt. I'm going to say that right now, and this is why I asked you how you feel about your debt. I'm going to mention a couple of popular ones, okay? There's the avalanche method, which is paying off your debt with the highest interest rate first. So you're going to, when you list out your debt, I want you to start putting numbers by them in the order in which you want to pay them off as I'm going and as you figure out the method that you're going to use. So avalanche method, I have seen time and time again, it's going to save you the most interest in the life of your debt. And it's also going to allow you to pay off your debt a little bit sooner than using the snowball method. The snowball method is paying off your debt with the smallest balances first. Why would you want to use the snowball method over the avalanche method? Because people who gravitate towards the snowball method are looking for quick progress early on in their journeys. Why do they see that? Because they're tackling the debt with the smallest balance first, and they're just knocking those off in the beginning. Why would someone use the avalanche method? If you are like me, then it makes you mad as heck that you are paying so much to interest every single time you make a payment. That is what infuriated me. I hated knowing. I would do projections. I'm talking about years out in the future on my debt. I would get to the end, like I would do like an amortization schedule. It's like, oh, by the time you pay this off, you will pay $30,000 in interest. What the heck? Like that made me really mad. So it's up to you. If you're wanting to see, if you have anxiety around the amount of accounts that you have, maybe you have some smaller credit card debt that you just want to knock out of the way, then use the snowball method. Get rid of those smaller ones, and then you can change the avalanche method later on. If you're like me and you want to know that you are making and saving the most on interest, then you would start with the avalanche method. I want you to number your debt list in the order you want to pay it off based on the method that you choose. Or you can come up with a method of your own. It does not have to be one or these two. Maybe you have a debt that is literally keeping you up at night. Remember, the whole point of this financial transformation is ensuring and making sure that you feel successful with your money. And so what does that mean? It means that you have to address your emotions in this equation. If you're just doing something because someone is telling you to do it and you feel nothing about it, it's like, I was told to do it, so I'm just going to do it. And you have no emotional connection to the progress and success that you're having in your life, and it's going to be really hard to sustain that. And sometimes these debt journeys, like mine, 9 years. So you're going to come up with the method in which you're going to choose to pay it off. And then what you're going to do is you're going to nurture that plan of attack. Sometimes, most of the time, these debt payoff journeys are years in the making. And so we need to nurture, inspect, and tweak our plan of attack as we go along. And that's really important. This is something that we can't just create and walk away from. I used to analyze my plan of attack every single month. Is this still working for me? Can I do something differently? Did something in my life change? Did I get a raise? Did I get a bonus? These are all going, can I make an extra debt payment? Do I want to change the order in which I'm paying this off? So those are all something that you're going to want to figure out. On the trackers, I get a lot of questions about these trackers. Miko, how do you color these trackers in? So now you can, on these, You can kind of tackle it in a couple of different ways. Number one, you can tackle it if you want to see how much debt you have to pay off or how much you still have to pay. It can go either way. So what I do is when you fill these out, you're going to track the balance of your debt, not the interest or your payments, if that makes sense. So you're gonna, for example, let's say you owe $2,000 on a debt. And so you have your goal of $2,000. Up here you have it written down, and you make a $200 payment, but it only knocked $150 off of your balance because of interest. Then you would color in to the 1850 mark on your tracker. So you're tracking the balance, not the interest or the payments on these trackers. Now, usually we have 100 little images for you to color in. And so you're going to take your balance and divide it by 100. And that's how much each, like for example, how much each one of these flowers represents. And you're going to color your way along. So I get questions too, like, Miko, what if I divide my debt balance by 100 and it's not a whole number? What I like to do, I round up to the whole number, the nearest whole number. And then the last payment I have is either a little bit under or over than my normal flower number on the chart. Right now, you can get the accompanying worksheets to my brand new book, My Money, My Way. We have action steps. We call it Make It Happen at the end of each chapter. And we created all these worksheets to go and help you with those action steps. It's at thebudgetmom.com/My Money, My Way. There's a form for you to fill out. As soon as you fill out the form, you're going to get an automatic email with these worksheets. And you'll automatically be enrolled in our 10-day Attack Your Debt email challenge, which is going to come with that debt payoff calculator. Why is that calculator so important when we're going to be talking about a plan of attack for your debt? When you're sitting here and you're like, Miko, I don't know what method to choose. And we kind of get stuck at this point, so we don't really take the next step. To help you choose, I created a debt payoff calculator where it's going to allow you to input all of your debt, and there's a drop down on there where you can choose the avalanche method or the snowball method or your own method, and it's going to give you projections, baby. Like every projection number you're going to want to see. It's going to show you how much interest you're going to pay off on the life of your debt. It's going to show you when you're debt free as a whole and for each individual debt. And I think that when you see the interest, when you get the difference between the avalanche and the snowball method, you'll lean more towards the avalanche method because sometimes it's a big difference. But that's there to help you see the consequences of the method that you choose. I know a lot of the time when you start these debt payoffs plan, you're like, I'm just going to use the snowball method because that's what everyone else does. That's what he recommends, right? No. This is about you feeling successful with your money and choosing a method that works best for you, and more importantly, one that you're going to stick to. One that's going to keep you motivated to continue on with your progress with debt. It's hard to look at sometimes, but remember, you can't change what you don't know. And a lot of this anxiety that we feel around our finances, debt in particular, a lot of this guilt and shame is because we haven't given ourselves a chance to address it yet. And the only way we can do that is by looking at it, recognizing it, and having what I called yesterday, or actually it was a couple days ago, just decision-making awareness around, okay, this is my realistic starting place. That's okay. Now I know, and it's time to create a plan to get where I want to go. And that's what this mini lesson is about. So we're going on a half hour. I get a talking. I have a ton more information about paying off your debt in my brand new book, My Money, My Way. I've heard a lot of really great things about this chapter. This is chapter 10 in my book, around the audio version. You know, people are like, oh, I could really hear your emotion in this chapter. That's because this was so near and dear for me. This was my struggle, my fight for such a long period of my life. And so to help people get to the point where they find the level of success with their debt, whether they paid all off, whether it's a certain amount just this year, whatever your personal goal is with debt, I hope you reach it. And I want you to keep in the back of your mind when you are getting to the point where you're creating a plan to pay it off, just remember in the back of your mind that this is not just about huge, ginormous debt payments. This isn't about walking out at the end of the day saying, oh, I just paid off $5,000 of my debt. This is about all the teeny tiny little things that led you to the success that you just found within yourself to get there, that you're going to hold on to dearly, things that you have learned to keep you from going back into that place in the future. We are talking about lasting change here. Oh, how many times and I did this in my life, I did it once. Before my divorce, I paid off all my debt on my own, without my ex-husband. I paid off all my credit card debt. I paid off all my medical debt. Debt-free. There I was, screaming at the world, I'm debt-free. I didn't learn a dang thing. Because at that time, it was just pay off the numbers. I don't care how I got there. Didn't really pay attention along that journey. I literally was just scrapping and just fighting to pay off my debt. And it was all about debt payments to me. So what happened? I went through a divorce, didn't take care of any of the triggers or bad spending habits that led me into debt in the first place. I didn't address some of the trauma from my childhood, the emotions that I felt around my divorce. I didn't acknowledge myself or the things that I truly wanted. I felt guilt and shame for the dreams and goals that I wanted to accomplish in my life because they didn't look like anyone's around me. And so I relied on debt again. And this time I put myself in even more debt than I had when I paid it all off the first time. This is about understanding who you are to your core. Not just today, but all the things in your life that have led you to this point. It's funny to think that who you are today is a bunch of building blocks that made you into who you are. And now we're going to use building blocks to get better and find this true financial transformation with our finances.